Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to educate consumers, grow their practices, and to leave a legacy. I'm doing a series of spotlights on remarkable advisors across the country. And joining me on this segment is Mike Peterson out of Las Vegas, Nevada. He's an advisor with the Ameriprise. Mike, welcome to the program.
Well, good morning to you, Mark. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Mike, tell us a little bit about your work, and specifically, who are the types of folks that you specialize in helping?
Well, thanks for asking. So, Mark, my practice has been in existence for going on its 16th year. We help clients, quite frankly, all across the country. We specialize really in helping them get to where they want to go financially. That could be that they're simply planning for retirement, but a lot of clients are retired and they want to stay that way. Right? But it could go beyond that. But really, those are the two primary areas that we focus on.
What would you say is the most common or biggest challenge that you hear from when clients reach out to you? What are they really looking for?
Well, I think what they're looking for is clarity. How do they decipher what could be just considered a distraction? The media does a pretty good job of getting us distracted on really what should be our clear objective. But unfortunately, distractions pop up all along the way. And so oftentimes people are just looking for a way to, hey, how do I separate distraction from what is truly important?
Could you give us some examples of like some of these distractions? What do people hear in the media that they kind of get distracted by or kind of repeat, maybe even a myth or misconception?
Mark, where do we start? You can turn on the TV right now and hear about the latest variant of the COVID pandemic. I forget which variant we're on by now. You're hearing about things like inflation. You're hearing about what about spending this and how is it going to affect that? It's really almost a merry-go-round of topics. You can spin a wheel and it's going to invariably land upon just some flavor of the day. It almost doesn't matter what it is, but oftentimes the end result is the same, and that is it's a distraction from having you focus on truly what's important.
Yeah, I think the variant is like the Optimus Prime variant or something by now. That's a joke, obviously.
Right.
But, so let's speak about the pandemic for a moment. As you mentioned, people are distracted by it. It comes up in the news. Does that change their outlook? Does it actually change the strategy that they should take, or do they think it changes the strategy? How has the pandemic affected people's mindsets?
Well, I think it does affect them because what you see around you becomes your new reality. It is your frame of reference. And so what I have found is that you still have long-term goals that need to be established no matter what's happening in the present. And so oftentimes, you get shaken to death mentally and it becomes your new reality, right? What I have found is that my best clients, those that have achieved really substantial success, they don't let the distractions dissuade them from accomplishing those goals. I'll give you a quick story. I was the ripe old age of 15 years old, and my dad was the one that was teaching me how to drive. Now, back then, it was a big 1970-something Buick, one with those big long hoods on it. And first time I get behind the car, it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. I'm weaving. My dad is riding in the front seat next to me, and he says, "What are you looking at?" And I gave him some story about, well, Dad, I'm doing as best as I can, da-da-da-da-da. He said, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, literally, what are you looking at? And I thought about it, Mark, and I said, well, Dad, I'm looking at the hood ornament. I'm using that to kind of line up my line. And he said, you can't do that. Your eyes have to be where? Down the road. I didn't know that. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the experience. The moment I changed my perspective of where my eyes should be focused, everything changed. Straight down the lane, straight as an arrow. I'm the next Mario Andretti. The rest is history. And I just shared that quick story because I think as investors, there are too many people out there that are behind the wheel, thinking they're doing the right thing, but they're weaving all over the place and they're losing direction from where they should be going.
That's a great insight and example of that. Mike, speaking of sort of, not knowing what they don't know. When you start working with folks, do you see people making any big common mistakes with their
Yeah.
plan, or any pitfalls that they fall into you can kind of warn people about?
That's a great question, Mark. And I think the very first one is before they even start working with an advisor, whether that be me or anyone else, they need to make sure that they have a proper emergency fund. Far too often, people come to me with the best of intentions. They want to get started right away, but I think they're not quite ready. Why? Because they don't have an emergency fund that's proper. Now, when I say proper, it runs the gamut based upon their situation. But you should, if the world were to stop and you lost your job, you lost your income, you should be able to continue to pay your bills at least for say 6 months or so, because you don't want to dip into really good investments before you have to, right? So I would say that is the first thing that people have to do before they start working anywhere. Really focus on debt and really focus on having that emergency fund. I think the other thing is one thing that say the past 12 months I have observed is markets have been very favorable. You could almost throw a dart at a list of investments on a wall and walk away looking pretty good. Unfortunately, what that shows is that can almost mask some of the irregularities in a proper portfolio. What I mean by that is good investments can even trip and stub its toe, but even bad investments can look great. And so investments do come in and out of favor. I think it's a great time now for people to be reevaluating, hey, what I invested in, is it still proper? Is it still in alignment with what those long-term goals might be?
Great insight. I appreciate that. Mike, what inspired you to get in this field and help people with their finances? How did you get started?
Uh, Another great question. My grandfather was he was a working guy, worked just really hard, blue collar to the bluest of the blue. He was a factory worker, and after working 40 hours a week for many years, he had a nice pension to show for it, and that's fantastic. Well, unfortunately, we as working people, the concept of a pension just isn't as common today as it used to be. In fact, the responsibilities really come on our shoulders to kind of provide for our own retirement. So that light bulb went on. I said, people need help. They can't just rely on working 40 hours a week and having the nice gold watch to show for it in a pension. So people have questions, and I view that as a great opportunity to help my neighbors and my clients and my friends.
Now, before I ask you my last question, speaking of help, for folks that know that they need to get their financial houses in order but just don't know where to start, what would you say is the most important thing that people should consider when choosing an advisor to work with?
Ask a lot of questions. Every advisor, it's not like buying a gallon of milk. You need to find out, how do they communicate? What is their philosophical, value proposition? Are you in alignment? Some advisors out there cater more towards and this is my frame of reference, they cater more towards a day trader type mentality. Buy something on Monday to sell it Tuesday. On the other hand, I said I can't be somebody that I'm not. I prefer to focus on the serious long-term investor. Investing is different than trading. So if you are out there looking to work with an advisor, find out, what do they specialize in? How do they communicate? How do they work with their clients? And do those values, do those align with your own? I think that's a great starting point. There's nothing wrong with asking a lot of questions.
For folks that would like to speak with you, Mike, and ask a lot of questions, how did they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Well, you can go to my website at www.ameripriseadvisors/Mike.Peterson. Or you can simply just Google Mike Peterson Ameriprise, and you'll be able to find me as well.
Awesome. Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with my audience today. Great information, great insights, and I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
You bet. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
That was Mike Peterson, an advisor with Ameriprise. And this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to inform and educate their consumers, grow their practices, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.